it is me, Christina. So today I wanted to talk about venous stenting. More specifically, my experience with venous stenting. I'm definitely going to make a more informational video on this in the future because I think that's important. But there is so much more I need to learn about this topic before I can make that video. So today we're just going to be focusing on my personal experience. Now, if you guys have been with me for a long time, my very first vlog ever is actually my experience in real time with venous stenting. I'll definitely link that vlog for you guys up here and then down below. That was my very first weekly vlog before my vlogs even actually had a week. I've been noticing, especially in the support groups, that more and more EDS patients are being diagnosed with high intracranial pressure as well as venous stenosis, more specifically cerebral venous stenosis, meaning collapsing or narrowing in the veins in and around the brain. And I know how terrifying and uncertain of a diagnosis this is. This is all fairly new to our community. Of course, it isn't a new symptom, but it seems like it's something that is being more newly recognized and screened for as a complication of EDS, and therefore it is being more commonly treated. But because it is something that is fairly new to us, there really aren't a whole lot of resources and information available to patients who are dealing with this condition, especially for people who are dealing with it in conjunction with other chronic diagnoses. So now that I'm a little bit over a year post-op, I felt like this was a good time to share my experiences, not just about the diagnosis and procedure itself, but what it has been like a little bit more long-term and what the recovery process has been like for me. So I currently have a stent in my right jugular vein. Your jugular veins are kind of those big hose veins that are inside of your neck. And a stent is this little metal tube. It kind of reminds me of like a little spring, and they can put it inside a vein or an artery, and once they put it in, it springs open and it holds everything open. It's kind of like a ship in a bottle in the fact that once it's in there, it's part of you now. So why did I need a stent? Well, about a year and a half ago, I started to have some pretty severe neurological complications that were progressing pretty fast. I suddenly lost the ability to walk and to coordinate my steps. I lost feeling below my waist. My vision was super blurry and double. My right eye was actually starting to lose vision altogether. I could barely hear over the extreme ringing and whooshing sounds inside of my ears. I had terrible vertigo. I was nauseous all the time. I had trouble breathing. I had full body spasms, changes in my bowel and bladder function, a lot of brain fog. I didn't really feel like myself. I felt confused. And I was having these spells of paralysis and losing consciousness, especially if I moved my head and neck. It was not good. It was pretty scary. And like I said, I just really didn't feel like myself. I felt really off. And honestly, out of everything, that was the most off-putting. I really just felt like I was losing control. So we headed to my neurosurgeon in Maryland. We all figured this was a complication of my spinal instability and some of my past fusions. And we're honestly all kind of stumped when my imaging came back pretty darn good. There were some things that we picked up on in the imaging that looked kind of off, but there really wasn't anything that could explain all of the symptoms that I was having. And my physical therapist was actually really adamant with my surgeon that if he couldn't find one thing to fix that addressed all of the symptoms I was having, then he was looking in the wrong place. But my surgeon was pretty concerned, and for good reason. He told me that even when I was in his office, he suspected that I was having mini strokes. They also sometimes call TIAs, which is a trans ischemic attack. A stroke is kind of like a car accident, while a TIA is more like a traffic jam. A clot or something can get stuck temporarily, but eventually makes its way through. But with the stroke, that clot gets stuck and it stays stuck and it causes a lot of damage. The damage from TIAs are really only supposed to last a few hours. I was extremely lucky, but it's definitely something that's considered a precursor to a real stroke. So we were kind of on high alert. My surgeon ordered an MRV, which is kind of like an MRI. You're in the same machine, but they are looking very specifically at your veins. And on that scan, we started to get a better picture of what might be going on here. You can't really tell from this type of scan exactly what's going on, but it does give you a clue in which areas to look. So we could see that there really wasn't very good flow in some of the areas around my brain, but we couldn't tell if this was due to narrowing or a clot. So he called up his colleague in Virginia who specializes in this stuff. We hopped in the car and we went to his office. He pretty much took one look at me, took one look at my scans, and directly admitted me to the hospital. So that very night I underwent testing that is called a Cerebral Angiogram. Now I could honestly make an entire video on my experience with the Cerebral Angiogram. It was kind of awful, but I don't think that would be very helpful. It was honestly just me stuff. It really had nothing to do with the procedure or the doctor, but this testing was very necessary and it did yield a lot of important results. And these results are actually not really what we were expecting to see, which is why it is so important to have the angiogram and not just base things off of the MRV. If we were to have placed a stent based on the MRV, we would have chosen very different areas than what we ended up going with. So during a cerebral angiogram, a catheter, a tube, is threaded up through your upper thigh, your groin area, through the femoral artery, all the way up into your brain, where they then can test various pressures and inject dye and take scans. Unfortunately, you have to be rather conscious for this test because you have to be able to respond and do certain things like cough, and just being awake changes how things work. So if they put you to sleep, they wouldn't really be able to see what's actually going on in your day-to-day life. They do usually give you some sedatives, so you're not really supposed to remember too much of it, but I don't really do well on sedatives, so unfortunately I had to be more awake than I wish I was. By the time the angiogram was over, I was pretty much done for. It had been like 2 days since I'd gotten any sleep. I hadn't been on any feeds because we didn't know if I'd be having surgery. So I gotta say I wasn't too thrilled when my surgeon came in and said that he needed to run a couple more tests. But off to CT in the middle of the night I went. And that just helped to fill in the very final piece of the puzzle for us. And my doctor came up to talk through our options. So in the back of your brain, you actually have sinuses. You have two sides and they serve a similar function to the sinuses in your face. Their job is to drain. They drain blood. And in my case, neither side was really draining. Apparently, instead, my brain was draining all of the blood through the little veins around my spine and spinal cord. My surgeon actually said that they were so engorged that they were pushing on some of those spinal nerves, and that was actually why I was having such similar symptoms to when I was having spinal instability. He then went on to explain that the testing revealed that the issue on my left side was in my left transverse sinus, which is where he had seen most of the problems on my MRV and where he was planning to probably be stenting. But when he actually got in there with the angiogram, he was able to see that the problem in my right side was actually my jugular vein collapsing. So it was the vein in my neck. It was kind of really right on the line, but it was still in my neck. And he was able to see that for some reason my body was really trying to use that right side. He also went on to explain that the body really only needs one working sinus, and that meant that we could kind of choose which side we wanted to stent, which was kind of a no-brainer for me, no pun intended, because brain surgery, neck surgery. And if my body wanted to use the right side, why wouldn't we listen? He totally agreed. He said that that was the decision that he would have made. And so the very next day, I went in for my stenting procedure. And this time I was asleep, and let me tell you, I was very glad. I do want to make sure to mention that I did not have Eagle's syndrome. Eagle's syndrome is when there is something structural that is pushing down or compressing that jugular vein, which is another thing that is common with EDS patients. That is actually why he sent me in the middle of the night for that CT scan, just to make sure that there was nothing structural going on. Because in that case, a stent would not be the answer. So how did I feel afterwards? Well, honestly, pretty darn great. I have to say that my symptom improvement was immediate. I woke up and I could see. I was actually very hesitant to even tell that to people because I was so scared it was gonna go away. And that very night, I walked right down the hallway. I had been in a wheelchair for months. I felt like I could breathe again. I could hear again. And most of all, I felt like myself again. I was told to expect the worst headache of my life, but to be perfectly honest, my head hurt a lot less after the surgery than it had going into it. I probably could have left that very night, but because it was so late and I was so tired, I stayed the night and was discharged the next day. By far, the easiest surgery I have ever been through. But after that, I slept. I slept and I slept and I slept and I slept and I slept to the point where I was starting to get nervous that I would never stop sleeping. I slept for probably a good week or two. I'm not kidding, I was exhausted and every movement felt heavy. My arms and legs, I felt like I was full of sand and I was just operating this body. I was starting to get worried that maybe some of those little TIA incidents had done some permanent damage, but eventually that did subside and I felt great. Now, the thing about the pain is the pain never really lessened. So it wasn't a severe surgical pain when I woke up. I don't even think I was taking the pain medication. I'm pretty sure I was just putting an ice pack on my neck. But that pain kind of didn't go away. It was the kind of pain where you couldn't touch the area, I couldn't wear clothes or a necklace that touched the area, and that complicated things a little bit because I had still been in the neck brace from one of my spinal fusions. That was not going to happen. No way could I have worn that neck brace. So I think that also played a role in some of the pain and fatigue I was experiencing. I really wasn't used to not being in the brace and I didn't have the muscle strength to hold my head up, especially when I had so much pain. And if you're wondering about an incision or a scar or wound healing afterwards, I mean, it's pretty much a pretty lame scar. It's just this tiny, I wouldn't even call it an incision, I would call it more like a puncture, right in that bend of your leg. 2 tiny little stitches on it that they call angioseals. Really no problem to take care of. They fall out on their own. I can't really see down, but I'm pretty sure there's like not even really a scar there now. So super easy to care for post-surgery, super lame scar. One thing though that I did not anticipate after surgery was that you have to be on very strong blood thinners for a few months afterwards. I was already on blood thinners going into this, so I really didn't expect much, but let me tell you, when I say very strong blood thinners, I mean I would rest my arm on the table and pick it up and it would just be purple. Like, the bruising was absolutely awful. I felt like I couldn't go in public with my boyfriend at the time because I thought that people would figure he beat me up. I looked like a Dalmatian. In the grand scheme of things, it really didn't bother me. I'm really not that self-conscious, but it was bad. It hurt. You did feel bruised all over. So that just brings us to the rest of the recovery. I had a 3-month checkup with my surgeon where he did another CT, make sure everything was in the right place. The flow was still flowing. It was in the right place. All was flowing well. He was extremely pleased with my progress. He said that at the point that I was at 3 months, if something with the stent was going to go wrong, or if my symptom improvement was going to reverse itself, it would have already happened. I guess that 3-month point is kind of your safety zone, because obviously the biggest fear is that one day you're gonna wake up and all of the improvement is going to be gone again. Now at this point, I was still in pain. I was still in just as much pain as I was when I had woken up from surgery. I found that unusual and he did not. He said that unfortunately with these jugular stents, because they're so big and they're in a mobile area, they tend to be more painful, which is something I wish he had told me beforehand when I was making my decision. Don't think I would have changed my decision. Would have been a nice thing to mention. Because when you're talking about stenting like a transverse sinus, you're talking itty bitty little stents. When you're talking a jugular vein, I got one of those like Chinese finger trap things in there from when you're a kid. He said that it may or may not go away. And I said, okay. And it didn't until I had my last fusion in my neck, and I believe that is because I can no longer move that area at all, so there is nothing pulling on it. If you had asked me if I was willing to put up with that amount of pain for the rest of my life for the improvements that I got from the stent, my answer would be yes, a million times yes. That stent pretty much turned around the course of my life in like an hour. A question I get asked a lot by you Debbie Downers, just kidding, will I need further stenting in the future? That is something that we still don't know. We don't know the longevity of this kind of thing. We don't know if the areas around it may start to collapse, or if one side will prove to not really be enough. I do have to say that I have recurring symptoms during times when there are changes in air pressure, like big storms, or that time we went into the mountains. Those are the times that I wish that maybe, just maybe, I had 2 working sinuses. But in my day-to-day life, it really isn't affecting me very much. And it's definitely not at a point where I would ever go in and have another surgery now just to fix that. So my left side, still not draining. We're kind of ignoring it for now because my right side is a champ and it's doing really well. I can confidently say to any of you who are wondering, I am more than a year out and I am still experiencing all of the improvements that I experienced the very first day of having this stent. Nothing has gone downhill, and I really don't expect it to anytime soon. Now, the unfortunate part is that my story is not everybody's story. So just because you find out that you have stenosis in your brain doesn't necessarily mean that a stent is going to be the miracle answer like it was for me. I hate saying that, but I have to. I've had friends who have gone in for stents who didn't have any symptom improvement. And then I've had friends who have gone in and, like me, it completely changed the course of their life. And our surgeon is the first to say that they are incredibly terrible at telling which patients will benefit and which ones won't. It's strange. It doesn't really correlate with the severity on the imaging. It's really kind of a gamble. Some patients also need something called a shunt put in because not only is the pressure of the blood too high in their brain, but the pressure of the fluid around the brain is too high. So a shunt kind of drains some of that out and controls that. So some patients need one, some patients need the other, some patients need both. Once again, he said that sometimes it can be hard to tell which patients need what. We're kind of in this generation of experimentation, which sounds bad, but honestly, I'm pretty proud and excited to be part of this groundbreaking treatment. I couldn't be more thankful to the surgeon and to the hospital and to my parents who have allowed this to be possible for me. So I hope this video has been helpful to you, whether you are going through it or you have a loved one who is going through it, or maybe you are a medical professional and you see this happening and you don't understand why. I am a testament to say that this is something that is working. We don't know a whole lot about it yet, and some people are a bit skeptical, but it does work, and I'm living proof. So I want to thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more videos like this, some chattier, more personal health updates, then give this video a thumbs up and let me know. I also make some more generalized educational videos as well as weekly vlogs if you want to check those out. And if you like them, it would be cool if you would subscribe. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!